my god, it's beautiful.
There's just something about a cabin in the woods that just satisfies that horror itch. From Sam Raimi's Evil Dead, where a group of friends unleash demonic forces in an isolated cabin, to the relentless terror of Friday the 13th at Camp Crystal Lake, cabins have long been a setting where safety turns into peril. These films tap into a primal fear of isolation where the wilderness becomes a hostile force, and the walls of the cabin are no protection against the horrors lurking just outside. Even films like The Blair Witch Project and The Ritual amplify this fear, using the wilderness as an inescapable nightmare that traps its characters with no way out. But in 2012, a movie came along that redefined what a cabin horror film could be. Directed by Drew Goddard and co-written by Goddard and Joss Whedon, this film didn't just use the familiar setup of friends in an isolated cabin, it dissected and deconstructed the genre's most beloved tropes, offering a terrifying and clever commentary on the horror formula itself. I'm Mike Conway for Joe Blow Horror, and today on Horror Party Movies, we're cracking open a cold one and cracking into the labyrinthian layers of The Cabin in the Woods follows a group of 5 college friends who set out for a weekend retreat at a remote cabin. On the surface, it's a perfect setup for a traditional horror movie. An isolated location, a group of stereotypical characters, and the looming sense of doom that something terrible is about to happen. But as the film unfolds, it becomes clear that there's much more at play than a simple fright fest. But this cabin is anything but ordinary. As the story progresses, we learn that every aspect of the environment, from the creaky floorboards to the spooky cellar, is being controlled and manipulated by a shadowy organization with a terrifying agenda. This organization, working behind the scenes, is tasked with ensuring that certain horror tropes play out exactly as planned, all to fulfill an ancient ritual.
You understand what's at stake here.
So what type of party does this cabin set up? Let's fire up the old party meter. Yep, according to this scale, this movie is an absolute rager. I mean, we've got wild twists, tons of monsters, and just the right mix of horror and humor to satisfy you and your friends.
You will come to see things my way.
Of course, every party needs a good signature drink, correct? Let's hop back behind the bar and see if we can whip up something that will pair perfectly with this ride of a movie. As with any good party game, there are some rules to follow, or break as you see fit. For today's game, take a drink when any classic horror trope is utilized or subverted. When the control room operators adjust the environments to manipulate the characters. When Steve gets his merman wish. When you spot a reference to another horror film. And finally, with any
fatality.
And shit, if drinking's not your thing, there are plenty of other ways to play. Grab your favorite snack, energy drink, or just sit back and enjoy the ride. Just remember, don't end up like one of these poor college kids. Know your limits, and keep it fun.
My parents are gonna think I'm such a burnout.
And of course, to save our asses, let's go ahead and read this disclaimer. So, it's been over a decade later. Does Cabin in the Woods still hold up as a fun fright fest? Let's unlock the basement, dust off those old horror tropes, and let's get right to it.
Oh, let's get this party started!
The movie begins with a cold open that immediately signals the audience that this isn't your typical horror film. Instead of starting with the usual eerie shots of a desolate forest, you know, the kind that you would get from a stock video site, we are whisked away to the high-tech underground facility where 2 middle-aged office workers, Sanderson and Hadley, played to perfection by Richard Jenkins and Bradley Whitford, are gearing up for some kind of big operation. And here's the kicker, their job is to manipulate everything that happens at the cabin. These guys are the puppet masters, pulling the strings to ensure that the group of friends meets a horrible fate, all for the sake of an ancient ritual.
Pull the string! Pull the string!
The facility is stocked with high-tech equipment, hidden cameras and traps, all designed to lead the group into making the worst decisions possible. Whether it's releasing pheromones to make them act recklessly or rigging the environments to push them towards certain doom, Sitterson and Hadley are the ultimate horror movie directors. They even have a betting pool with the colleagues on which monster would take out the group.
Congratulations, go to maintenance.
But this isn't just about scaring people. They're doing it to appease ancient gods who demand a ritual sacrifice in exchange for not destroying the world. And who are the foolish mortals chosen as food for the gods? We've got Dana, Jules, Holden, Marty, and Kurt, played by a pre-Thor Chris Hemsworth. Yes, pre-Thor. I'll get to that in a bit. Instead of the group being stereotypical horror characters, the friends are actually pretty damn smart. But once they arrive at the cabin, something starts to change. These well-rounded characters slowly morph into the familiar horror tropes we all know. It's almost like watching a horror-themed version of Mystery Inc. as the group starts slipping into their roles. Kurt becomes the typical jock and he's got those Fred vibes down pretty much pat. Jules turns into a flirty blonde. Dana starts feeling like the obligatory final girl. Marty pretty much remains a Shaggy. And Holden, well, he eventually plays that romantic interest that eventually bites it towards the end. Once they embody their cliches, the party truly begins, which also involves a truth or dare act making out with a wolf head.
I dare you to make out with that moose over there.
They find a creepy basement filled with strange artifacts, each tied to a different horror scenario. Unknowingly, Dana reads from an old diary, summoning in a family of backwards zombies who crawl out of the ground and start picking off the group one by one. Meanwhile, in the control room, Sitterson and Hadley are celebrating with another successful setup.
I am never gonna see a merman. Ever.
Dude, be thankful. Those things are terrifying.
It's this combination of horror and humor that makes this movie so damn fun to watch. But let's be real, the true highlight of this movie are the monsters. This isn't just your run-of-the-mill slasher movie where you get one big baddie hunting down the cast. Oh no, this movie has an entire arsenal of monsters. And by arsenal, I mean at least 80 different creatures, each with their own horrifying backstory. Oh shit, look at that list. Let's talk about some of the wildest monsters you'll see in this movie. Ever wanted to see a merman devour a dude's face? Or a unicorn straight up stab the shit out of someone? This movie has you covered. We've got your classic horror staples like zombies, werewolves, and vampires, but things get weird in the best way possible. There's a giant snake, a creepy ballerina with a face full of teeth, and even a homicidal robot. And let's not forget about the Lovecraftian elder gods pulling the strings from below. Now here are my personal favorite monsters. This movie doesn't just give you one type of horror, it gives you all of them. There's a moment in the movie when Dana and Marty finally make it down to the underground facility. They're surrounded by glass cubes filled with every nightmare you can imagine. Each cube houses a different monster, and when those cubes open up, all hell breaks loose. Zombies, killer clowns, giant bats, demonically possessed dolls, you name it, it's there. The carnage that follows is pure, unfiltered monster mayhem, and it's a glorious sight to behold. And that's just scratching the surface. There's a whiteboard in the control room listing every possible horror creature you can think of, from a blob monster to a jack-o'-lantern head to Kevin, whoever the hell Kevin is.
Hello.
Not only does this film pack an impressive array of classic and original monsters, but there was also a cool tie-in with the video game Left 4 Dead 2. Originally, some of the infected from the game like Tank, Witch, Boomer, and Hunter were supposed to appear in the movie during the monster rampage. This crossover was part of a planned DLC that would let players battle Cabin in the Woods creatures in Left 4 Dead 2. But unfortunately, the content was scrapped when MGM's financial woes delayed the movie's release. Which brings me to how a movie to come out in 2012 could feature a pre-Thor Hemsworth. The Cabin in the Woods was actually filmed back in 2009, long before Chris Hemsworth became the hammer-wielding god of thunder. Due to MGM's financial troubles, the film sat on the shelf for a couple of years before it finally saw the light of day in 2012. By then, Hemsworth had blown up as Thor, making his appearance here even more fun for audiences. The delay didn't hurt the film's impact though. If anything, it added to its mystique, turning it into one of those long-awaited must-see horror flicks where it had an early screening at Butt Numathon, hosted by someone who could have easily been one of these monsters in the movie. Speaking of which, off topic, have you ever read Harry Knowles' Blade 2 review? Jesus Christ. The movie's climax is a tour de force of horror spectacle. Dana and Marty, the last survivors, fight their way through the chaos and eventually come face to face with the real masterminds behind the terror. But in the film's true fashion, things don't wrap up neatly. Instead of giving the demands of the ritual, Marty and Dana decide maybe the world should end. The movie closes with a giant hand of an ancient god breaking through the earth, ready to destroy everything. It's bold, chaotic, and strangely satisfying ending that leaves you fucking grinning as the credits roll. The Cabin in the Woods is just a horror movie that has it all. I mean, you got clever writing, jump scares, laughs, and a shitload of monsters. Joss Whedon and Drew Goddard created something truly special with this movie. I mean, it could have been a straightforward horror flick, but they turned it into a genre-bending experience. Whether you're in for it for the scares or laughs, or you just want to see some monsters tear some shit up, this movie truly delivers. So what do you think of Cabin in the Woods? Have you spotted all the monsters yet? Let us know in the comments, and we will see you on the next one.